everyone, welcome to Watch It Played Table Talk. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this sometimes weekly segment, I propose a gaming-related topic, share my initial thoughts on it, and then invite your responses to the YouTube comments and your own videos that I'll compile into next week's Table Talkback episode, and that way we can all participate in the conversation. I wanted to keep the topic simple this time because at the time of this recording, I'm still setting up our new shooting space here, so I didn't want to tax my brain too hard. I thought we could talk about the subject of ties in games. Are they good? Are they bad? Do we feel there's some situations where they work and others where they don't? Well, let's dive in. Recently, I was playing a new game. Well, actually, it's an older game, but it was new to me. It's called In the Shadow of the Emperor. And I was playing it with Rich from the excellent Cardboard podcast. I highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already, and I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. And I was also playing with two other gentlemen, Jared and BJ. Now, all three of those guys had played this game before. In fact, multiple times, I believe. I had not. So at the beginning of the game, I really felt like I wasn't doing very well. I was pretty sure I was going to lose this. But as time went on, I started to feel like, okay, this is making more sense to me. I think I'm actually starting to catch up a little bit. But the victory points in the game are hidden until the very end. So I really didn't know. So I was delighted at the end of the game. We added up the points, and it turns out I had tied for the victory with Rich. So of course we went into the rule book to find out who was the true winner by discovering the tiebreaker rules. But there weren't any, and I was even more delighted because that means I didn't have to take second place. And I could claim the victory. Or could I? Is a shared victory, a tie, as meaningful as an outright win? Now, in this particular case, I'm a little too biased. I definitely am going to claim the victory, but I would normally say that I prefer when there is some kind of tiebreaker in the rules. In fact, when I don't see them, I sometimes wonder, did the designer just forget? Did the publisher make a mistake in the rule book and they just didn't get added? What's going on here? Because normally they're pretty simple to add. And in fact, I think you could even make an argument that tiebreaker rules can add not necessarily complexity, that's not what I want to say, but extra decision making, some interesting choices to make in a game. For example, if you know to win the game, you need to have the most victory points. But in the case of a tie, you also need to have the most gold. Then suddenly when you're playing the game, you have to be a little more thoughtful about how you spend that gold resource that you might have. This comes up, I think, pretty frequently in the game Biblios, where there's only a few victory points to go around, so ties are kind of frequent. Suddenly, you don't necessarily want to spend that gold, even when you think you might need to, because, well, this could be really important as well. So again, it introduces a different level of decision making. Now that said, I do think tiebreakers can go too far. I've seen some games where there's like 4 or 5 levels deep of tiebreakers. So it's like, if you tie for the most victory points, the player with the most money wins. If you're still tied, the tied player with the most cattle wins. If you're still tied, the tied player with the most sheep wins. If you're still tied, the tied player with the longest hair wins. If you're still tied, the tied player willing to cut off their finger wins. It's too much. At that point, I think you've gone too far. I think 2 or maybe at most 3 tiebreakers it should be more than enough to settle on a winner. One other reason a designer might want to consider having tiebreakers is if they think their game might ever end up being played in a tournament setting. Because if you have prizes to give out to players, you definitely want to not have ties. You don't want ties, is what I'm trying to say. Right? You want to be able to say, this person won, they get first prize and second prize and so on. Now, some games, like Cosmic Encounter here, actually allow for and even encourage players to consider working together towards a shared victory or a tie. Now, mind you, that game has a lot of negotiation and potential for backstabbing, so maybe working towards a shared victory in that setting makes a little more sense and also helps prevent the game from going too long. As we wrap up here, I should probably just make a comment about the feeling of tying a game. In the example I gave earlier, I expressed kind of an elation at having tied and shared the victory, but I'm not sure if Rich experienced the same thing. He might have felt like, wow, I think I won this game. And then the tie might have diminished that sense of victory. Now, I should say, Rich was a tremendous sport, of course, and I'm sure he was more focused on all of us having a good time at the table. But I just think that's a potential feeling a person could have when there's a tied game. I don't really know the psychology around this. I did do a little digging around to see what I could find. Adam Naylor from Boston University talked a little bit about the psychology of tying, and I don't have an exact quote here, my memory's not that good, but I believe he said something along the lines of, a tie is it can be an unfulfilled outcome, particularly for people who are programmed to see games as either having a winner or a loser. So a tie is kind of this fuzzy, maybe unsatisfying area. That said, I do sometimes wonder if tiebreaker rules don't diminish a victory in some way. In other words, if two players have played a long, tense, strategic game, back and forth, real tug of war, points coming and going, and in the end they tie, isn't it better that they get to go away with the feeling of, hey, we both won this thing. That was a really good, satisfying struggle, and we were both equal to the task. Isn't that perhaps better than trying to dig down to some obscure, tie-breaking thing that then says, well, you won just this little bit more? Maybe, since they both put in such a great effort and had such a good showing, it'd be more satisfying for both of them to feel like the victor in that case. Well, I don't know. I'm sure there's some people who feel differently. I'm not even really sure myself. And so that's why I think I'd like to turn it over to you guys and get some of your thoughts on it. Do you like ties? Do you not like them? Are there certain situations where you do and don't? Do you have certain favorite tiebreakers, certain ones that you just think are ridiculous? Do you have a great tiebreaker story? Just put those in the YouTube comments below, or if you'd like, you can record a quick 1 or at most 2-minute video and send me the link to that, maybe a Dropbox link, Google Drive, or whatever, and I'll try to compile as many of these as I can into next week's Table Talk Back episode. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.